From claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt.
EWTN Radio presents The Miracle Hunter with Michael O'Neill.
Welcome to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. We've got a great show ahead for you today. I always love looking at modern medical miracles, and we've got a great new book, You Visited Me, Grace and Healing in the Modern Medical Center by Dr. Robert Collins, and we'll be learning more about some of the miracles that he's encountered. Later in the show, we're going to be looking at a topic that has been of interest to me in some ways. I've heard of this. Many people over the years, Catholics and otherwise, kind of being interested in this idea of the mystical meaning of numbers. And I'm curious, is there anything to all that, those numbers? And so we'll be talking with Jason Gale from Tan Books about the mystical meaning of numbers. That's a brand new book out from Tan. And we'll find out, is there anything to that? And my series, They Might Be Saints, airs on Tuesday, April 21st. The episode on Montse Grasses airs. And I examine the saintly life of Montse Grasses, the cheerful 17-year-old who faced cancer with extraordinary faith and joy, who could be the first woman of Opus Dei to be declared a saint. My other series, Explore with the Miracle Hunter, one of my favorite episodes, airs on Saturday, April 25th at 5:30 p.m. Central Time, and that's the episode on Borang. And we explore one of the 20th century's most highly approved Marian apparition cases, as the Virgin with the Golden Heart appeared 33 times to 5 children at a convent school in Borang in Belgium. And so you can check that one out on Explore with the Miracle Hunter. Later in the show today, we're going to be looking at the Might Be Saint of the Day. For today, we've got Blessed Andres Hebernon Real, who lived in 1534 to 1602 in Spain. The 365 Days with Mary project looks at Our Lady of the Oak from Roble San Bartolomeo al Mare in Italy in the year 1671. And the question of the week, what is the Catholic Church's official position on visionary and stigmatist Marie-Julie Jahenny? That is a tough one. I'll do my best to answer that one in just a little bit. And the miracle of the day, the Opelousas tree apparition in Louisiana in 1995. I'll tell you about that reported miracle in just a little bit. Let's take a look at the miracle news. We do this every week where we talk about the miracles happening around the world and those things that relate to miracles. And people can go to the Facebook page of The Miracle Hunter or my Instagram account, and you can see some of the stories that we post there about all the miracles that are happening all around the world. Some are big and some are small, and this is kind of an interesting smaller miracle, you might say. There's a seaplane pilot who made a miracle emergency landing on a busy street. And the quote is, "They walked away, no one else got hit." A small seaplane made an emergency landing on a busy street in Phoenix this week after experiencing engine trouble mid-flight, and it narrowly avoided what officials say could have been a catastrophic incident. And the aircraft carrying 3 people descended rapidly before touching down on a stretch of roadway typically filled with traffic. Witnesses reported seeing the plane lose altitude before the pilot skillfully guided it between cars and utility poles. And emergency responders arrived within minutes to secure the scene and assist those on board. And authorities confirmed that all 3 occupants survived the incident with only minor injuries. And remarkably, no pedestrians or other drivers on the ground were harmed. Fire officials described the outcome as nothing short of a miracle, noting the heavy traffic area at the time of the landing. And eyewitnesses described moments of shock and disbelief as the aircraft approached the street, and some said they initially thought the plane was going to crash into nearby buildings or vehicles before it leveled out just in time. And several bystanders captured video of the aftermath, showing the plane intact and resting in the middle of the road as emergency crews worked around it. And investigators are now working to determine the exact cause of the engine failure. And aviation authorities stated that while emergency landings are rare, the pilot's training and quick decision-making ability likely prevented serious injuries or loss of life. And the incident has since drawn widespread attention, with many describing the sequence of fortunate circumstances as an extraordinary and perhaps miraculous escape. In other miracle news, there's this widely shared story out of New Orleans that describes a dramatic boating accident that left two men stranded in cold water for several hours. And according to reports, the pair had been on a routine outing when their vessel had capsized, and it forced them to hang on to debris while waiting for help. The temperatures dropped, and no immediate rescue was in sight, and I guess the situation became life-threatening. One of the men later said that he began to pray as their chances of survival appeared to diminish, and not long afterward, a passing boat approached and pulled them from the water, and both men were rescued safely and treated for exposure. But the timing of the rescue, coming shortly after the prayer, has been highlighted in the accounts of this incident as a striking coincidence. And according to the story, the rescuing vessel was named Second Chance, a detail that's drawn particular attention in media coverage and on social media. And the incident has since been widely described as a miracle, or at least an instance of divine intervention, though officials have not attributed the rescue to anything beyond circumstance. For the survivors, many who have followed the story, however, the sequence of events is certainly a miracle for them. And that's today's miracle news. Let's take a look at the miracle of the day. We do this every week where we talk about the day's date and what miracles in Christian history have lined up exactly to that date. And so this is not a formally approved miracle, but on April 18th in 1995, crowds gathered nightly in the spring along Nash Drive in the Opelousas, Louisiana area after reports spread of a vision resembling the Blessed Virgin Mary appearing in a cluster of trees. Witnesses described a luminous figure, with some claiming the image seemed to descend from the sky before settling within the branches. By the end of the first week, more than 200 people were assembling after dark, many kneeling in prayer, holding candles, and reciting the rosary as they focused their attention on the same spot. And local media documented this phenomena as interest surged, publishing photographs and first-hand accounts from residents. And some attendees of the tree, while others described some attendees insisted the figure was clearly visible and distinct from the natural shapes of the tree, while others described a more subtle outline that became apparent only after prolonged observation. And the gatherings took on an atmosphere of a vigil, drawing not only nearby residents but also visitors from surrounding areas curious to witness what many believed could be a sign or apparition. Now, of course, church officials did not formally validate the event as supernatural, but no official recognition was issued. Still, for those who attended, the experience left a lasting impression, and personal stories, such as those of a local woman who is said to have first seen the figure, circulated widely, adding to the sense of mystery and significance. And decades later, memories of those nights remain vivid for many who were present, including that event on April 18th, 1995. I don't know what this news item is, but it is interesting, so I thought I'd report it to you. But this is the Our Lady of the Tree in Opelousas, Louisiana. Not approved by the church, but it's an interesting, miraculous event, potentially, that occurred on that date. Let's take a look at Catholic Pub Trivia. We do this every week where we look at a trivia question and ask that question and give out a prize to an emailer who writes in the fastest with the correct answer. Last week's question, we were talking about St. Faustina. So the question was, before entering religious life, St. Faustina had a vision of the suffering Christ while attending a dance. In what city did this pivotal experience occur, leaving her to immediately leave and pursue her vocation? And the answer is Łódź in Poland. That's Lodz, but I think that pronunciation is Łódź in Poland. And writing in with the correct answer was Angeli Bradshaw. Thanks, Angeli, for your answer, and for everyone else who wrote in for last week's question. Now, the question for this week is, how many officially approved Lourdes healing miracles have been from the United States? We're talking today about medical healing miracles, and so it's only appropriate to talk about Lourdes with this trivia question. How many officially approved Lourdes healing miracles have been from the United States? If you think you know that answer, want to win the prize, the image of the faces of Mary, send me an email to questions@miraclehunter.com, and we'll see who's the fastest, and answers and winners will be posted on the show page on miraclehunter.com. We need to take a short break. But when we come back, we're going to be looking at the mystical meaning of numbers. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. I have numerous friends over the years and acquaintances and otherwise in the Catholic world who always are talking about numbers. Not just engineers, of course, but these are people who find great meaning in repeated numbers found in history and tradition, and especially in the Bible. And there's a new book it's an old book that's been republished, I should say, The Mystical Meaning of Numbers from St. Isidore of Seville, translated by Father Robert Nixon, and it comes to us for the first time in English. And this is a fascinating work on the deeper meaning of numbers. And we're so excited today to be joined by Jason Gale. He's the VP of Content and Production for Tan Books that published this one, The Mystical Meaning of Numbers. Welcome back to the program today, Jason.
All right, thanks for having me on, Michael.
Yeah, it's great to talk with you today, and I think this is an interesting thing for a lot of people. I think a lot of people find sort of patterns and numbers interesting, but of course, when we talk about the Bible, numbers take on a whole new meaning, especially in their original context. Talk to us a little bit about this work from St. Isidore of Seville, where this is coming from.
Yeah, sure. So St. Isidore of Seville, he's considered kind of one of the last great fathers of the Latin West. So he lived between 560 and died in 636. He was a bishop, he was a scholar, and later proclaimed a doctor of the church. And kind of one of the things that he's known for is his really large work called Etymology, which is a massive encyclopedia of not just theology, but also science, language, and history. And his kind of nickname when he was proclaimed doctor of the church was the schoolmaster of the Middle Ages. And so he really kind of preserved a lot of the learning and brought it into the Middle Ages. And for many of especially for St. Isidore here, they kind of began with that understanding that everything is ordered toward God, and there is nothing outside of God's providence. There's nothing outside of his control, or nothing happens by accident. So when you begin with those kind of first truths, if you want, when they look at sacred scripture, the numbers in sacred scripture are intentional. They're ordered signs towards divine truth. And so for St. Isidore, it was kind of a mystery to ponder and a mystery to try to explain because, he believed everything could point back to God. And so numbers can reveal something about God in a similar way that words can.
Fascinating. And I know that St. Isidore is the patron saint of computer programmers and perhaps databases and all this. So numbers were very important in the life of St. Isidore. And when we look at the mystical meanings of numbers from the Bible, let's go through some examples. What kinds of numbers are we talking about? What are the famous ones, and what are the meanings behind them?
The first one is obvious, 1. And one of the first things when I read this book, because I never really thought about it, but he brings up in here is that 1 is not properly a number. So when he goes into 2, he says 2 is the first number, and I was like, that's fascinating. We always think of that, but he says, if you use kind of the colloquial phrase, there's a number of those. When you say the word number of, you're saying that there is more than one, and so kind of that illustrates the point that 1, as St. Isidore says, it's not properly a number, but it is the source of all other numbers. And what this symbolizes is God's absolute unity, his indivisibility, his completeness. There's one God, one church, one faith, one baptism, and so kind of the number 1 points to all of this. But we get all of the rest of the numbers from this unity, from this 1. So even when you get to people like St. Thomas and the scholastics, when they talk about the transcendentals, unity is one of them. 1 is one of those transcendentals. So for me, that was a fascinating thing to kind of discover in this, is one is not actually a number. So, and then he goes on to, obviously, the book goes on to number 2. And so what the book goes over is 1 through 12. So it covers those 12 numbers and kind of goes into all sorts of different meanings, and most of them are fairly positive. But, there is one in here that I found just absolutely fascinating. That was the number 11. And so for Saint Isidore, 11 represents deficiency and falling short of perfection. But not only that, because 11 follows 10 being representing the completeness of both the law, so you have the 10 Commandments, right? So 10 is a completeness of God's will and His law. And when you and he talks about there being, the 10, David plays on the 10-stringed harp, representing kind of the totality of praise offered back to God. There's the 10 candelabra that Solomon has to image complete worship. But when you get to 11, it not only represents kind of you once had 10 and now you've kind of lost it, but also a fall from 12, looking at the apostles. The sin of Judas, the result of sin, is a falling into 11. And so for me, 11, it was fascinating to read that, because there was no real positive attributes to the number 11. It was a sign of imperfection and disorder.
Amazing. Then, of course, with 12, you mentioned the government, authority, the tribes of Israel, the 12 apostles. That's one of the famous numbers that we know of from the Scriptures. We've been talking today with Jason Gale on the mystical meaning of numbers. This is a brand new book out from Tan Books. It's a reprint or a translation now by Father Robert Nixon of this book, or this writing of St. Isidore of Seville. And of course, one of the very famous numbers in the mystical sense is the number 7, this idea of perfection or completion, God creating the world in 7 days, or the Sabbath, the seventh day of rest, or 7 seals, trumpets, churches in Revelation. Talk a little bit about number 7 and why that's a big number for us.
Yeah, and one of the fascinating things that I love about Saint Isidore's writings as well is he doesn't just, one of the things he brings up with a lot of these is not just, the meaning of the number itself, but also, kind of what else is divisible by that number and what else makes up that number. And so for one of the things with the number 7 is that it's the most sacred number after 1, after unity. And its symbol, one of the symbols is it's the combination of 3 and 4. 3 being the 3 persons in one God, so 3 being God, but also 4, which represents corresponds with the 4 actions of virtue of the human soul. So it's a union of both divine and the 4 human virtues, and so. 7 really is kind of that perfect number. And then even in sacred scripture, you have the 777, so you have 3 sevens in a row. And so that has further meaning in that. But everywhere in scripture where we find 7, it always points to a fullness, a completion. So you have the Sabbath, you have the gifts of the Holy Spirit, you have 7 churches, you have and even in the apocalypse, there's meaning there, but it all leading towards completion, rest, and union of both God and creation. So this is also why it holds importance for in heaven, where we will find that rest, that completion of both God and creation.
This is fascinating stuff. And then you had mentioned 11 is one drop down from that special number of 12. If you drop down from the number of 7 and land on 6, is this a number of imperfection or humanity at that point?
So for Saint Isidore of Seville, this is very 6 is it's not as negative as 11. But 6 is connected, kind of is contained within creation. So there's nothing, there's usually nothing that kind of points to the divine with the number 6. It's kind of a completion in process. So we have creation completed in 6 days. There's 6 ages of history, 6 stages of life form. And so for Saint Isidore, it's kind of a hierarchy of beings. It's ordered towards completion, especially within creation and time, but it is not yet perfect. The divinity has not been brought in and kind of brought it to absolute perfection, which we don't get until we get to the number 7. But it is a completion of. It is a completion in process of both life and history.
Amazing. We've been talking today with Jason Gale, the VP of Content and Production from Tan Books. And this is a new book that's coming out. It's The Mystical Meaning of Numbers, and it's a translation and release in English of this writing by St. Isidore of Seville. And now you had sort of given an intro to St. Isidore as well earlier in the program today. And in the book, there is a brief biography of St. Isidore that's included, and quite a few footnotes to clarify the context and the significance of these numbers going on. Describe, if you would, for a person who encounters this book, what are they going to find?
Yeah, so the first thing I think you're going to discover is kind of the brilliance of Saint Isidore, and our translator, Father Robert Nixon, who's a Benedictine monk over in Australia. He went to great lengths to really include little translator notes throughout, where he'll help the modern reader understand what St. Isidore is talking about, and maybe bring in some further examples and kind of explain to the reader some further things about the numbers. But the other thing I think that the reader will find going through this is kind of that, I don't want to say reassurance, but for me that's, kind of what it is. We kind of understand that, God is the creator of all. God brings together everything for a purpose. But even, but when you start to look into the great details of just numbers, the most kind of basic thing we live our life on, we kind of just think they're there and they're laws of physics and things like that. But when we start to really look into them, St. Isidore does a wonderful job of just pointing out the kind of the divine plan within something as basic as just numbers. And so it's just absolutely beautiful to see the depth when you look at something just like, 12 numbers.
For people who are interested in digging into these numbers and trying to get a greater understanding of them from a biblical point of view, what's the best place that people can go to pick up this book?
Yeah, the best place is to go to tanbooks.com. You can also find it on Amazon. We always like to ask our listeners, if you have a local Catholic bookstore, go support them. They do wonderful things for not just the church, but the community as a whole, and they're a great witness. So if you have one close by, go visit them and ask for it.
God bless. That was Jason Gale from Tan Books talking about this new release, this Mystical Meaning of Numbers, this book written by St. Isidore of Seville and translated by Father Robert Nixon.
We're talking today with miracle hunter Michael O'Neill. Michael, is there a particular miracle that stands out from the rest for you personally?
Well, there are so many miracles around the world that I find inspiration in, and getting to travel to these places in the Explore series. And I think that the access that we've been given to the Eucharistic miracles of the world, that has been particularly moving to me, whether it's in Lanciano or in Tixla in Mexico or Buenos Aires in Argentina or in Sokolka or Legnica in Poland. And we've done episodes on these for EWTN television and programs for miracles of the Eucharist. To me, those have been the most incredible moments for my faith. I do love seeing miraculous icons of the Virgin Mary or the incorrupt saints or otherwise, but being in the presence of the Lord, which is already a miracle, the biggest miracle we have on earth, and then to be in the presence of a miracle on top of a miracle, those Eucharistic miracles, and to have been given such amazing access to those places by the priests at those sanctuaries and locations. Those have always been the most special of all the of all the miracle locations that I visited. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be looking at the question of the week. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. Hey, I love getting your questions. People write in from around the world with questions about miracles happening in today's world and those that have happened centuries ago. And I've got a pretty interesting email inbox, as you might imagine. A lot of interesting things headed my way. And I try to answer them when I can, but I really like answering them on the show. And even more so, I like answering them in person. I go around the country and I give 10 or 20 talks a year to different Catholic parishes or conferences or events. I'm always talking about miracles, of course, and I talk about Marian apparitions or Eucharistic miracles or how saints are made or how the Catholic Church investigates the supernatural. But I always love answering the questions at the end. That's my favorite part, where I hear what people are thinking about related to miracles. And that question and answer can often go 15, 20 minutes or more just to hear what everybody's thinking about related to the world of miracles. And for people who are interested in having me speak at your parish or event, you can contact me through my website. Go to miraclehunter.com and click on the Contact tab and send me a message that way. And maybe I'll be speaking at a parish near you sometime soon. Question for this week is an interesting one. It's about Marie Julie Jeheny, who's a stigmatist and alleged Marian apparition recipient. And the writer for this week's question, JM, says, I see on your site Marie Julie Jeheny, and your site says she hasn't been recognized officially. And I'm wondering where the church actually stands regarding her legitimacy. Thank you, JM. Well, thanks, JM, for your question. And it's a good one because the mystic Marie Julie Jeheny, who lived from 1850 to 1841 and had visions of Our Lady of the Scapular of the Sacred Heart, the question is, where does she stand as far as the Church's recognition of her? And well, we might not have a very clear answer today, but we do know what hasn't been said. And so we can make an argument from silence, I suppose. And so there's been no official recognition given to this mystic. There's no statement of constat de supernaturalitate that is established as supernatural. The Church has not issued a positive judgment affirming her visions, prophecies, or stigmata are supernatural. So there's been no positive declaration in the same way that we would see at Lourdes, Fatima, or Guadalupe. We haven't gotten that positive judgment related to Marie Jeheny. And there's been some caution expressed in the Diocese of Nantes in France. The local bishops historically have exercised caution regarding her claims, and her phenomena were monitored by the clergy, but there was no endorsement from the diocesan authorities about her prophecies or any other issues. And, of course, the lack of approval is not the same as condemnation. So, but we have to just point out the fact that there's not been condemnation and then there's been no promotion. And so we can't see her as an approved mystic, and we can't see her as a condemned mystic. So she would sit in this middle category of non constat de supernaturalitate, not established as supernatural. Although there's never been a formal statement as such, that's sort of the essence of where she stands. This idea that the Church has never approved nor condemned her. And there are no books or other resources that make the argument either way about Marie Julie Jeheny from Our Lady of the Sacred Heart. And so that's probably a non-satisfactory answer, JM, for your question. But for those people who have questions for the Miracle Hunter, you can send me an email to questions@miraclehunter.com, and I'll try to answer your question on the air next week. Let's take a look at the 365 Days with Mary project. We do this every week where we talk about the Marian devotion of the days that lines up exactly to the day's date. You all know Fatima May 13th, or Lourdes February 11th, or Guadalupe on December 12th. But believe it or not, there's a different other Marian devotion for each and every day of the calendar year. And so for today's date, April 18th, we've got Our Lady of the Oak from Roble San Bartolomeo al Mare in Italy in the year 1671. And the story goes that on the night of April 3rd, 1671, after working all day in the field, Jacinto de Rollo, age 50, called his wife saying his arm was hurt. His left arm had no feeling and no medical attention helped him. On April 18th, putting his arm in a sling, he took his donkey out to graze, and a woman dressed in a turquoise shining like the sun dress told him to trust her for help. Then she told him to go to the Madonna della Rovere to fulfill the vow he had made. It became known to him that this woman was Mary, and the solemn coronation of the statue took place on September 8th, 1921, in the cemetery where he had established a majestic altar. And that is Our Lady of the Oak from Roble San Bartolomeo al Mare in Italy in the year 1671. For more information on this fascinating devotion or any of the hundreds of other Marian devotions, you can go to the website 365dayswithmary.com, or you can download the app 365 Days with Mary, Marian Calendar, or you can pick up the book 365 Days with Mary. Now let's take a look at the sainthood news. On Monday, March 23rd, Pope Leo received an audience as Eminence Cardinal Marcello Semeraro, the prefect for the Dicastery for the Causes of Saints. And during this audience, the Supreme Pontiff authorized this dicastery to promulgate a decree regarding the heroic virtues of the servant of God, Giuseppe Castagnetti, the faithful layman and father of a family born on March 15, 1909, in Monte Baranzone in Italy, and he died there on June 22, 1965. And according to the Dicastery for the Causes of Saints website, they say he was a faithful layman and family man. And his son said, "What I remember best about my father was his spirit of prayer, always hidden, always in touch with the Lord." And that is the sainthood news for this week, with one miracle. Now venerable Giuseppe Castagnetti will be known as Blessed Giuseppe. And the might-be saint of the day is Blessed Andres Ebernon Real, who lived from 1534 to 1602 in Spain. And he was born in 1534 in Alcantarilla, near Murcia in Spain, and he was born to an impoverished Spanish noble family. He was educated by his uncle, who was a chaplain in the Cathedral of Murcia in Spain. And Andres worked and saved for several years to build up funds to provide for his sister's marriage and help support his parents. And while taking it to them, he was attacked by thieves who took everything. He took this as a sign from God that worldly riches had no value, and vowed to devote himself to spiritual riches. And he joined the Franciscan Friars Minor in Albacete in Spain on November 1st in 1557, and he made short pilgrimages to Marian shrines, visited the sick with priests, and spent endless hours in meditation and prayer during Eucharistic adoration. And he moved to the Alcantarine Reform Convent of San Jose in Elche, Spain, in February of 1563. The next year he was there when St. Pascal Bailon received the habit. And he was assigned to establish a convent in Valencia in Spain, and he became a close friend of San Juan de Ribera. And he died, predicting the date of his death 4 years earlier, on April 18th, 1602, in Gandia in Valencia, of natural causes, immediately after having prayed a rosary. And his relics were moved there. And on May 22nd, 1791, Pope Pius VI at St. Peter's Basilica declared him a blessed. And that is today's might-be saint of the day. For people who want to check out my television series, which relates to the book They Might Be Saints, and we've done as many as 25 people on the path to sainthood, episodes on them. And so for Tuesday, April 21st, we've got the episode on They Might Be Saints, Montse Graces. I examine the saintly life of Montse Graces, this cheerful 17-year-old who faced cancer with extraordinary faith and joy, could be the first woman of Opus Dei to be declared a saint. And that is They Might Be Saints, Montse Graces. Check that one out on Tuesday, April 21st. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking with Dr. Robert Collins about his brand new book, You Visited Me, Grace and Healing in the Modern Medical Center. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. We always like talking about medical miracles on this show, and it's always amazing when things pop up in the news or otherwise that are inexplicable by science. But there's a brand new book that's out. It's called You Visited Me, Grace and Healing in the Modern Medical Center. It's by Dr. Robert Collins. And we're so grateful to have him joining us on today's program. Welcome to the show today, Dr. Collins.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's great to be on with you.
Yeah, it's great to dig into this book. And I know your book traces your journey from agnosticism to faith. What experiences, prior to even writing this book, sort of shaped your worldview or challenged your previous worldview?
I had been raised a Baptist and baptized at the age of 9 or so, but had pretty much lost my faith when I was a teenager and was just very agnostic as a young adult and going through medical training and all that. And I just felt no need for it at all. Life was just fine without thinking about that stuff. And I was in a research laboratory talking with one of my mentors about the area of science that we were investigating, which was a really fascinating area. And, just one of these incredible conversations galloping along, you're talking about what we know, what we don't know, what we won't know for 100 years. And then all of a sudden in the midst of this, my friend is talking away. In the midst of this, I just hear a voice sort of off to the side. And we were the only ones in the lab, and it wasn't him, and it wasn't like a thought when it comes in your head. It was like a discernible voice off to the side that just said, "Isn't this all a little too amazing to have just happened?" And it was like it'd been slapped. I went muffled, didn't hear my colleague talking anymore, and something had happened to me. And later on, I got home and talked to my wife and said, something just happened to me in the lab today, and I don't know what it was, but it woke me up, and I had this immediate intuition that I had been skating on the surface and missing something much deeper, and that I needed to begin to seek it. I didn't know what it was, but I knew I had to begin to seek it. So that started me off on just a path of a lot of reading and thinking, and eventually sort of read my way into theism, and then ultimately into Christianity and Catholicism. But I would say it was so much more than that. It was these truths that speak more to your heart than your mind. Nature and music and art and the love you feel for your children, and really a lot of experiences from my patients.
I wanted to ask you about that. How did your patients influence you in all of this? I know when you see people suffering and healing and them having perhaps a worldview with God in it, how did that influence your understanding of all this?
It was just a quiet love that was coming from God through these people. And so these are these patients. All my patients have cancer of various sorts and are dealing with a lot of tough stuff. And you'd think from all that they might curl up on themselves. But what I found is that they would open up and begin to care for me and befriend me. And, actually I would just say there was love there. And just to experience that, opened up again something in my heart, and all I can say is that the ways of God's love are obviously very mysterious, but I was experiencing that through my patients. So it was just all of these things, all of these graces that was healing me, gradually over time.
And you describe the modern hospital environment perhaps as cold, but there's grace to be found there. How do you think people in your line of work or people in the medical field can sort of be keep an eye out for that or be more aware of that of the grace?
Well,
that can be in the environment?
And I think that's true. I think all of us would think of, if you thought of the big modern medical complex right now, you would just think of this cold, stark, machine-like place, unfeeling. And it can be like that. And it can be so easy as a doctor just to say, okay, here's my list of patients I need to see today. Let's just get on with it. And, so easy to do that. But what I have found and what I try to convey in this book is that thanks to God's grace, which changes you and opens your eyes, you begin to see constantly in this seemingly cold, stark setting just warmth and love and healing, just permeating the place. So you begin to see not a story of a patient with lymphoma who's not doing well and ends up not making it. I mean, you see a story of a woman with lymphoma who's been made almost, well, I'll tell you a story about a woman with lymphoma a young woman who was just mean, really, to the staff, and just like especially mean. And we all had a hard time dealing with her. And I mean, she was kind of cruel to the nurses. And, I think that we could have just sort of shunned her off to the side, but the whole staff just said, we've got to reach out to this patient and show her kindness despite it all. And, because we don't know what we would be like if we were in the same sort of a situation. So the whole staff met this patient with kindness and love, and it just sort of took away this edifice of meanness and fear that she had shown to the rest of us. And with that, it made her open for, I think, a miracle. And this idea, she asked me, by now we had become good friends. And she asked me if I believed in God, and by then I could say yes. And she said, do you believe in miracles? And by then I had read some philosophy and ended up with the idea that we don't know how this universe works. So yeah, I'm open to it. And I told her that, and she told me about a priest who was some sort of had some sort of a faith healing ministry, and down in the south, a town several hundred miles south. And she said she wanted to go to this. Should she go? And I said, absolutely, you should go. And so she did, and when she came back, she was just completely changed. And she told me this story about how after the Mass in the setting of this sort of healing service, she had found herself just pressed to the floor, the marble floor, just like 100 pounds were on her shoulders and pushed her down to the marble face first, humbling her, because it's what she needed. She needed just profound humility. And when she got up, she was just sobbing. And after that, she was utterly changed. I mean, through the kindness of the team, she'd become sort of a nice, decent person. But after this, she was utterly transformed. And I truly have never seen anything like it. Just kind, and cared about everyone, and, didn't care about herself, cared about the others. And just a truly miraculous transformation of her. And sadly, she died. But again, this would be the idea that, man, if you open your eyes, there's a dramatic, beautiful story going on in each patient. But, as I looked at that empty church after I'd been to her funeral and they'd wheeled her body away, and I just stayed there for a while, and you might have thought that she hadn't been healed, but she had been healed. And so that would be the idea, Michael, that this sort of thing is just going on all the time. And we are blessed to be able to observe it with eyes opened by God. And we're blessed to sometimes be able to play a role. I mean, called to play some sort of a role, and hopefully answering that call and helping to be vessels of His grace and healing into the lives of some of these patients.
Absolutely. We're talking today with Dr. Robert Collins about his brand new book, You Visited Me, Grace and Healing in the Modern Medical Center. And that's amazing, the sort of redefinition of healing beyond physical recovery. That was a beautiful story. And now, how do you reconcile scientific rigor with faith? Can those two things coexist, especially in this technology-driven medical environment?
Well, absolutely. And I love science, in fact, but I love science as it is strictly defined. And, science was sort of come up with as a way of investigating things, and it just said we're just going to focus on what we can observe and control in an experiment. Higher things, we can't control those or really understand them by the experimental method, so we're going to keep those out. That would be like Aristotle's formal and final causes. Things about purpose and meaning and that sort of thing. So all it's saying is, this molecule bounces into that molecule and it causes this thing to happen, just cause and effect. It has nothing to say about greater, things of greater import, whether it's, things of meaning or purpose. Science just can't do that. And when scientists try and do that, they end up making these circular arguments. Like one of the great scientists, one of the great physicists says, the more we understand about the universe, the more we understand that it's pointless. Well, you just go, how do you know that? I mean, science doesn't tell you that. Science is incapable of telling you that. So that's really just your opinion. And so it becomes a circular argument. He says, the circular argument is that I believe the universe is meaningless. Therefore, any appearance of meaning is false because I believe the universe is meaningless. So, there's a lot of this sort of very non-rigorous thinking among a lot of scientists who've turned the beautiful discipline of science into a really ugly sort of a false philosophy, I think, of what some people call scientism, where they're just giving more to that than they can. So those of us, and I know many doctors who are very faith-filled, great scientists who love it, but do it well because they understand the limits of it. They understand what it can do and what it can't do.
And for the patient themselves and their experience, they find meaning in their experience with, their hope and the forgiveness they find and the meaning in suffering even. What can doctors, clinicians do to sort of foster these and support these aspects of the patient experience?
I would say that as Catholics, Christians, we are blessed to be able to more and more have God's grace abiding in us. That's the whole idea of the religion, is that we are transformed to more and more abide in Him, and He abides in us, so that we can be vessels of His grace and forgiveness for patients. And I love the title of your show, The Miracle Hunter, but it seems to me that we live in a miracle. And if we think of, this universe came into existence out of nothing because of God's creative act, that's a miracle. And that He keeps it going, that's a miracle. And that He talks to us through prayer and sacrament and scripture, that's a miracle. And that He comes in to transform us and then enters our lives completely, wherever we are. And in my life, that's so much in the hospital. He enters that, and He's bringing His forgiveness and healing and mercy and into the situation. And again, with eyes open, you can see the whole place is basically filled with just constant miracle. That's the more and more I do this, the more I understand, I think, that we live in a miracle.
Absolutely. And the name of the book is You Visited Me, Grace and Healing in the Modern Medical Center. What message do you hope that readers, they could be patients, caregivers, physicians even, what do you hope people take away from your book, recognizing the presence of grace in everyday life?
Yeah. So many things, but I think one is just that in this modern medical center, this place of fear and suffering and death, where God's grace is most needed, His love is most needed, His love is most present.
Beautiful. Well, we're so grateful to you for your book, You Visited Me, Grace and Healing in the Modern Medical Center. Thank you so much, Dr. Robert Collins, for joining us on today's program.
Thank you so much, Michael. Appreciate it.
God bless. That was Dr. Robert Collins. Amazing reflections in this book, You Visited Me, Grace and Healing in the Modern Medical Center. Check that one out anywhere Catholic books are sold at Ignatius Press or otherwise. And that's all the time we have for today's show. If you missed any of this episode or want to catch up on past episodes, you can go to EWTN.com/radio. Check out the audio archives or download the free EWTN app. I'd like to thank our guest today, Jason Gale, the VP of Content and Production from Tan Books, talking to us about the mystical meaning of numbers. And Dr. Robert Collins, You Visited Me, Grace and Healing in the Modern Medical Center. Check out my series, Explore with the Miracle Hunter, airs on Saturday, April 25th at 5:30 p.m. Central Time. The next episode is Barang. I explore one of the 20th century's most highly approved Marian apparition cases, as the Virgin with the Golden Heart appeared 33 times to 5 children at a convent school in Barang in Belgium. And I'd like to thank you for joining me today on Miracle Hunter, where from claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt. Talk to you next week.